Hello and welcome. We're about to jump into a topic that, well, it affects every single one of us every day, even when we don't realize it. And that topic is power. Now, I know when you hear that word, your mind probably jumps to presidents and CEOs, and you might be thinking, well, that's not me. But I think by the end of our time, you're going to see that understanding power, God's way, is absolutely crucial for our day-to-day walk with Him.
So let me just start by asking you a question, straight up. Just take a second and be really honest with yourself. Do you think of yourself as a powerful person? I'd been willing to bet that for a lot of us, the immediate answer is, no, not really. We just don't see ourselves as having that kind of influence in the world.
But hang on, let's look at this a different way. Because here's the simple truth. Every single one of us has influence. In our families, with our friends, at work, in our church, we all impact the people around us. And that ability to have an effect on someone, that influence, that is a form of power. So really, the question isn't if we have power, but what kind do we have, and what are we doing with it?
Now, why is this so important to get a handle on? Richard Gula just nails it with this quote. He says we're at the greatest risk of messing up when we pretend we don't have any power. You see, acknowledging our influence isn't about being prideful. It's the very first step of being a responsible steward. It's about being honest before God about what He's given us so we can handle it with integrity.
Okay, so let's dig in. If we're going to steward our power well, we have to be able to see it first. So let's walk through some of the different ways we have influence. And some of these you might have never even thought of as power before. First, you've got the ones that are kind of obvious. Physical and personality power. I mean, someone who's physically larger just has a natural presence in a room. An adult automatically has a type of power over a child. But it's also about personality, right? You know those people who just walk into a room and they just have this charisma, that magnetic energy? That's a real source of influence.
And then there's verbal and emotional power. Our words, wow, they are unbelievably powerful. They can build people up, bring healing, give encouragement, but they can also tear down, deceive, and control. And emotional power, that one's sneaky, but it is so strong. Think about the person whose bad mood makes the entire house walk on eggshells. Or think about the silent treatment in a relationship. That's a classic and often really destructive use of emotional power. Now, look at this. This is where it gets absolutely terrifying. These words, if you just read them on their own, they sound noble. They sound moral, maybe even Christian. They tap into that desire we all have for things to be good and right. But these words were spoken by Adolf Hitler. He wrapped a demonic agenda in righteous-sounding language, and millions of people were tricked because they made a fatal assumption. They assumed that godly-sounding words must come from a godly person.
All right, next up is knowledge and skill power. This one's easy to see. If you take your car to a mechanic and he tells you the flux capacitor is broken, well, you pretty much have to trust him, right? His expertise gives him power in that situation. Now, take that same idea and bring it into a spiritual context. This is what some people call God factor power. When a pastor or a Bible teacher speaks, we often assume we're hearing from God Himself, and that gives their words incredible influence.
And that flows right into positional and reputation power. Having a title, pastor, elder, manager, it comes with a built-in platform of authority. But reputation, that's a bit different, and it can be trickier. See, someone can build a great reputation over many years, and we just keep on trusting them based on their track record, without ever stopping to check if their character today is still worthy of that trust. The Bible actually has a heartbreaking story about an old prophet who used his past reputation to deceive a younger prophet, and it led to that young man's death.
So here's the bottom line. What happens when all these different kinds of power come together in one person? Think about a leader who has the official position, a magnetic personality, they're an amazing speaker, and they know their Bible inside and out. The potential for doing good is just massive, but the potential for doing catastrophic damage is equally huge. And that is exactly why deep, solid, spirit-formed character is not just a nice-to-have, it is non-negotiable. It's often why God allows brokenness in the lives of His leaders, a thorn in the flesh like Paul had, to keep them humble and totally dependent on Him. And this right here, this brings us to the absolute core of our discussion today. I think this is one of the most dangerous and widespread mistakes we make in the church. I call it the great deception. It's the trap of looking at a person's incredible talents and abilities and just automatically assuming that it means they have godly character. Just look at this comparison. It is absolutely stunning when you see it laid out. If you go through the New Testament, you'll find lists of about 20 spiritual gifts, and not one of them is a character trait. Think about that. A person can teach brilliantly, lead with incredible charisma, even perform miracles, and still be deeply, deeply flawed in their character. But then you turn to the qualifications for a leader in the church, an overseer. What's God looking for? It's almost entirely a list of character qualities: gentleness, self-control, faithfulness, a good reputation. You see, we are so easily impressed by giftedness, but God's number one requirement for his stewards is faithfulness. And this quote from Abraham Lincoln just perfectly captures the difference between reputation and character. See, your reputation is what other people think you are, but your character, that's who you really are, especially when nobody's looking. Lincoln's goal wasn't just to be liked, it was to be worthy of being liked. That right there is the heart of a person who's pursuing real, godly character. Okay, so we've talked about identifying our power. We see the huge danger in confusing gifts with godliness. So what? What do we do with this? Why does being aware of all this actually matter for you and me right now? Let's make this super practical. Here are 6 really important reasons. First, we need to be aware of our power to guard our own hearts from pride. Power is intoxicating. Second, we have to recognize we need training. Influence is like a powerful tool. You need to be taught how to handle it safely. Third, it's to avoid hurting people without even meaning to. We can be like a bull in a china shop if we're clueless about our own influence. Fourth, it helps us spot the wolves, the people who abuse their power to hurt the flock. And then it turns our focus outward. We become aware of our power, number 5, so we can help bring healing to people who have been wounded by its misuse. And finally, number 6, we understand our power so we can use it for what God intended all along, to build up and strengthen our brothers and sisters in Christ. As we start to wrap this up, everything we've talked about really comes down to one big biblical idea. None of the influence, none of the power we have is actually ours. It's all on loan from God. We are simply stewards, and that means we have a massive responsibility for how we manage what He's put in our hands. Our job, plain and simple, is to steward that power with total integrity. It doesn't matter if it's our theological knowledge, our position at work, or the emotional pull we have in our own homes. The moment we use any of that to manipulate or to crush or to silence someone else for our own benefit, we have broken a sacred trust with God Himself. And so I want to leave you with this incredibly sobering verse from the book of James. He gives this warning. He says, "Not many of you should become teachers, because those who teach, those who have spiritual influence, will be judged by God more strictly." Every single one of us has a platform of influence. The question we have to leave with today is this: how am I using mine? Is it to build up other people, or am I just building my own little kingdom? Because one day, every one of us is going to stand before God and give an account for the power He gave us.